Welcome to the Fed to Fed podcast, where we dive into the dynamic world of government technology. In this podcast series, we'll be joined by current and former federal leaders and industry trailblazers who are at the forefront of innovation. Here, we speak openly and honestly about the challenges and opportunities facing the federal government and the Department of Defense and its partners in the modern age, driving innovation and the incredible capabilities of technology along the way. Whether you're a federal leader, a tech industry professional, or simply fascinated by IT modernization just like us, this podcast is for you. And we're so happy to have you tuning in. Today, we have two truly exceptional guests joining us. Clement Chen, CEO of DS Federal, and Ethan Tu, founder and president of Taiwan AI Labs and president of AI Learning Alliance. Today, we focus on what government customers want from AI, hype versus reality of AI use cases that are more promising than others, and risks and challenges that people should be paying attention to. Clement and Ethan, thank you so much for joining us today.
Thanks for having us, Susan.
Well, why don't we go ahead and get started? And I'll ask the first question. What do government customers really want from AI?
I'll start off with that, and Ethan, feel free to pile on. I guess the first thing I would say is what they don't want. It might be a good place to start. And I think they certainly don't want a Cadillac when a bicycle will do, so to speak. There's also, I think, an allergic reaction to bright, shiny objects. And I don't think many of the customers are necessarily interested in being the guinea pig for your innovation. There has to be some tangible material proof points before you come in to work with a customer. Now, that said, there are many mission and operational needs that government customers are seeking. And they're looking for something that is practical and useful now, not necessarily some sort of field of dreams capability that might be there at some point in the distant future. Now, that said, there is some concern about FOMO, the fear of missing out. But I think they tend to want to experiment in ways that has, for lack of a better term, low risk and medium return, as opposed to a high risk, high return sort of setup. That's generally what we're seeing in the US government market. Ethan, I'm not sure how you're seeing it in terms of the Taiwan government as a proxy for how the international community might be viewing what they want from AI.
Okay, so Taiwan is always a good global citizen, which means when there's AI, the AI chips say more than 50% of AI chips is manufactured from Taiwan. More than 50% of the high computing power is also manufactured in Taiwan. And we also have a lot of IoT devices. So therefore, of course, Taiwan government embrace the AI and encourage all the industry to use AI. However, when we talk about can government use the AI, compared to the industry, when the government think about using AI, they're more concerned about the trustworthy, the responsible, and also the data governance. For example, and in Taiwan, we care about human data, for example. So we want to avoid when we apply the AI algorithm or the AI solution that actually in the end, one giant big tech company or the foreign government may own our citizens' data. So that part, the data justice, the data governance is one critical part we think about it. And in Taiwan, we also care about like people's privacy. We want to enjoy the convenience of the AI, but at the same time, we don't want hurt people's privacy. So some federated approach is discussed in Taiwan. Of course, a lot of the innovation is happening in AI, and it can also benefit from saving the effort and saving the cost in the government spending, make the system more efficient. That's that part government is interest, but they also worry about, for example, the job loss, maybe the change of the job, and different people may come by this migration. So there are also a lot of education, digital literacy programs working in Taiwan. And also, when we are using artificial intelligence, we also care about, for example, can we make sure this artificial intelligence is responsible? For example, before you apply an algorithm that make a decision, you rely on this algorithm, but it least have bias. Uh, it may make wrong decision, or maybe this decision is more China favor, Russia favor instead of the United States and Taiwan standards. So that also include the transparency and the AI bias evaluation, and also like a validation, and also the regulation stuff. I think the government right now, Taiwan government is very active looking for the AI solution, but at the same time is pretty cautious and trustworthy and responsible, as well as the data governance part.
Yeah, Ethan, I'd like to add on to that. In the U.S., it's interesting that there's a convergence in terms of overarching strategic priorities relative to AI. The Biden administration White House executive order reflects many of the themes that Ethan just talked about: safe, secure, privacy preserving, trustworthy, responsible AI. And the White House executive order is rather sweeping. It addresses not only standards for AI security, but also how it might impact privacy, how it might impact consumers, patients, students, workers, as well as the international collaboration arena. The public sector is a little bit different than a commercial sector in its use of AI, because the stakes in a public good is in the impact of it is extremely far-reaching, as opposed to the many subsectors of a commercial industry that is optimizing profits and stakeholder value, so to speak, whereas a public sector has a unique set of responsibilities and the sweeping nature of its impact on its citizens.
Excellent. That was very helpful. So, how does the hype versus the reality of AI differ?
There's a lot of hype. I think, Susan, you and I were both at HIMSS, the big health IT conference in Orlando this week, where we gathered together with 30,000 of our closest friends. And it was AI everywhere, everything everywhere all at once. And what's interesting is, if we take HIMSS as sort of a proxy for the hype machine, every year there's a theme at HIMSS, and in the past, the theme of the day may have been blockchain. It may have been mobility. It may have been patient engagement, population health management, big data. This week was certainly AI. And what I'll say about AI is, one, it's a fascinating thing, but what we ought not to do is foist onto it mystical powers, as if it's some sort of oracle emerging from the ether that is sort of like its own being. At its root, it's essentially a social collaboration tool. And it has to be viewed as such if we're going to take advantage of its promise, as well as avoiding all of its potential dangers. So certainly from a hype standpoint, there are some concerns that it'll eradicate people's jobs, or it may do all these wonderful, amazing things that may make human involvement less pronounced. I think that's a lot of arm waving, a lot of hype, but I think the reality of the situation is it is very effective at being sort of a force multiplier for human activity. And I think so much of our technology today is somewhat brittle in the sense that it forces the human to act more like the machine in order to get the value out of the machine. And I think the promise of AI reverses that a little bit, in which the machine becomes more within the flow and the mojo of the human, and therefore may make the interactions a little more natural. So instead of going from a graphical user interface to a mobility app to a chatbot, now language becomes the user interface of importance. Ethan, any thoughts on this?
Taiwan AI Lab in 2017, and before I founded Taiwan AI Lab, I was also the principal data manager for Microsoft and the founding data manager for Microsoft Cortana. I would say the new technology always comes with a hype, which means the over expectation, and at the same time, there's always a disappointment point. But there's always a reality and a breakthrough after that. Yeah, so I would say in year 2013 to 2017, I can already see artificial intelligence like internet is going to change everything in the future. If you have big data, if you have computing power, if you have the algorithm, you can one by one meet human parity in all the difficult field. Um, and of course, there are a lot of marketing around artificial intelligence at that time, including my company, Microsoft, before. Um, but there's always some over worry or over expectation at that time. I would say 2023 will be a very different year because before we think about okay artificial intelligence and we know they are coming, but I don't know what does that mean to us. What does that mean to people? But after 2023, Microsoft ChatGPT uh, released ChatGPT with OpenAI. I think suddenly people can feel that is like into your day-to-day work now. Yeah, so I would say after 2023, the large language model generative AI makes a lot of people think that was the hype become more realistic. Okay, now I see artificial intelligence is near me. Then how can I use it? So there are a lot of discussion and there are a lot of innovation. I would say last year, more than thousands of new startups, the AI company around the world. A lot of them, of course, they are based on the Gen AI, from the text to image to music, all kind of application in different field. So I would say uh, definitely every time there's a breakthrough, they will come with another hype. Like today, we see a lot of company, a lot of government sector, they think, oh, we can use artificial intelligence to do this, to do that. Yes, that's good. But of course, there are also some reality we need uh, to understand. And there are always some for example, especially in the public sector, there are some regulation and there are some how we can make trustworthy human-centered technology is for the public good. Instead, you send the general public into another evil empire or another government control surveillance program. So that that is also another topic. Uh, we Taiwan Airlines work closely with government and um, determine which part we can go faster, which part we need to be very careful. And we also work closely. Uh, European Union is AI Act. We also work closely with the government and assess the risk of the AI. After we know the risk of AI, then how we can uh, do the evaluation, how we can know the impact, and how we can make sure before we release to the general public, uh, what are the good process. We call it responsible AI in a transparent explainable, traceable, verifiable, and auditable approach. So we have different program is working on right now in Taiwan.
You know, Ethan, I want to riff on something you had mentioned. We're kind of in the shock and awe phase of Gen AI, and I think what has really made it take off in the last year is the ease of use and almost a democratized access to some of the initial features of it that makes startlingly great narrative text that's pretty well informed. It's almost like a parlor trick. It's almost like magic, but it's actually becoming very helpful. But what oftentimes happens with new technologies when they show up, we try to shove them into the most demanding use cases. And that's where a lot of the disappointment happens. And I think the IBM big data work with Watson and MD Anderson from 10 years ago is a great example of it. MD Anderson ended up spending tens of millions on trying to work on this oncology expert advisor application of big data and the beginnings of AI relative to that. But the data access, the MD Anderson was in the midst of an epic implementation for the EHR. So many practical realities of the operational exigencies of how health systems or customers actually operate made that end-use application of it, it became a failure. And I think there's a tendency to take a new technology, whether it's Gen AI or whatever, and shove it into the most demanding circumstances, which is not necessarily a great way to go. You don't want it to be doing everything for everybody everywhere. You want it to do something for somebody somewhere. And I think what's really great about what's happening right now, there's a lot of experimentation going on, both in US government as well as internationally to see what the universe of possibilities are. And so as some of these use cases become more pronounced, and some of them, that's why Taiwan AI Labs is so interesting to us, and why DS Federal wanted to form a strategic alliance with them, is in much of what they're doing, they've extended beyond just a pilot experimentation, but they're dealing with a material application of the technology in a way that scales. So there's a continuum. There's a crawl, walk, run phenomenon that is going to be in play. And what we found particularly compelling about Taiwan AI Labs is they're moving along that continuum at a pace probably a little further than most.
That's very exciting. So you mentioned use cases. What are some use cases for AI that are potentially more promising than others?
Let's start with HHS, the Health and Human Services, since one, that's a focus for DS Federal, and frankly, right, wrong, or different, health affects everyone without exception. And I think it's instructive to see how it has unfolded at HHS over the period of just 2 years. Back in FY22, if you look at the use case inventory at HHS, you'll see that there was at least 50 or so use cases. The real numbers are probably a lot higher, but most of it was being experimented with by NIH. And a lot of it, when you look at the various features that might be of interest, image exploitation, search, business process automation, prediction, deduplication, et cetera, the categorization function actually became one of the most prevalent in all the use cases. And that makes a lot of sense because that's sort of the near-term crawl phase of the use of the technology, and became extremely effective. So if you look at the 50 or so use cases that were in play a couple of years ago at HHS, categorization was key, and a lot of it was linked to grants data. So DS Federal specifically was involved in some of this, particularly in the research condition disease categorization function of the Office of Extramural Research. NIH processes $30–40 billion of grants a year, but they have to deal with unstructured grant applications that have to then be categorized, taxonomized, auto-classified, auto-tagged, or whatever to funnel it across the 350 research conditions and disease categories for reporting purposes and accountability purposes and things of that nature. And that's just the public-facing categories. Behind the green door, there's thousands of other categories that are being assessed for relevancy to ascend to the next official category or being experimented with for some other end purposes in mind. So the practical use of AI, doing AI for real, is actually happening there. Fast forward to this past year. Ethan mentioned that there was like this leap ahead step function in not only the capability embodied by the Gen AI movement, but also in overall experimentation adoption. I think the use case inventory right now at HHS is more than triple what it was literally the year before. And I think FDA is at the forefront of a lot of it right now. Mm-hmm. And so now they're looking not only in categorization, but including more aspects of its prediction as it applies to anything from the opioid problem to drug interaction problems to et cetera, et cetera. So what you see is a focus on mission data analysis, more so than operations. And I think this is instructive for us because that's our natural approach. We take the new technology and we shove it into the mission app. But I'll tell you that some of the more interesting use cases are the more practical ones, are actually operational effectiveness and efficiency. And that's actually not where a lot of the use cases are happening at HHS, but that may change over time because I think the foothold of proving its value may actually ultimately express itself there first before the mission data analysis, only because of the level of complexity that's required the more you become mission oriented. I know Ethan and Taiwan AI Labs have actually done not only operational effectiveness and mission suitability, but they're doing it in very demanding circumstances. And I'd love to hear Ethan elaborate on some of that.
Yes, definitely. So I actually worked for NIH Human Genomic Research Institute back in 2003 to 2006. I was senior program in Human Genome Research Institute. Yeah, similar to United States, I would say healthcare is a big issue everywhere for all the countries because all the government spending increasing a lot because health is actually a pretty complicated problem. And like Taiwan government, every year we spend more than 800 billion to 900 billion Taiwanese dollar in the healthcare. Therefore, how we can make this healthcare more efficient, how we can predict human disease more efficiently before you try to cure the patients, how we can support the doctors so the doctor's diagnosis can be more precise. Therefore, you don't need to give different drug, test different diagnoses. So there are a lot of precision health, precision medicine research initiative in Taiwan. So Taiwan AI, we work closely with Taiwan's medical centers. So right now we cover like 99.7 of 23 million population healthcare data. So with this health data, we work with the best doctor in all the medical centers to understand the disease, to support the doctor to diagnose the disease by AI, and how we can do the genomic genome-wise association study with electronic health record, genomic data, and also the health condition data all together. So that's one nationwide project we are working in Taiwan. And during the pandemic, for example, we also work closely with Taiwan's hospital, how we can develop the artificial intelligence algorithm to support the doctor to do the treatment, to support the doctor, for example, through the HSS rate, we know if this patient have COVID or not, to support the doctor using our fidelity analytics approach, for example, to know the contact tracing without government collecting users' data. That's also one research topic we did. I think we also work closely with DS Federal. So, for example, the CDC idea, actually we discussed with US CDC, and there's also a project we are going on is how we can, without centralize the data, for example, the CDC can use the data science service, then deploy the state government with the fidelity analytics approach. So we can have the base data scientists in, for example, DS Federal and US CDC working together to support the county to do the disease prevention diagnose without collecting their data. So that's also a very interesting project we are working on. And in Taiwan, because of the ChatGPT, we also have have some very interesting project. For example, we are the very first company around the world. We use the ChatGPT along with the medical image diagnosis technology. We train the large language model to identify the brain tumor, so we can identify if this patient has a brain metastasis tumor, and then using ChatGPT to support the doctor to write a report. Then this report, we are following the National Taiwan Insurance Agency's guidance. So there's observation, there's evidence, and how using the finding to write the diagnosis report. So this can again help the doctor to reduce their time, their effort, and also reduce the misdiagnosis. So there are different projects working on, and overall right now in Taiwan, for example, we cover 80% of medical centers with more than 122 projects working on in Taiwan. And every field is actually the best hospital, best doctor, and best machine learning team in Taiwan. We work together for the healthcare innovation. So I would say, yes, healthcare is an important part we are focusing right now. And I also echo what Clement said. It's actually very important to do this in scale and try to land in the hospitals.
Yeah, Ethan, I want to jump in on something. Susan, up until now, we've been talking with a laser-like focus on health applications, because obviously it's existential for everyone. But what's interesting is AI has the ability to cross-pollinate insights across multiple markets. So if you look at something like the epidemiological characteristics of disease spread, so whether it's the COVID or flu or H5N1, if you look at the disease propagation patterns where a localized disease infects a number of hosts that then converts over into a raging epidemic, that sort of outbreak analytics actually is not unlike what you see in the willful or otherwise disinformation spreading across, related to anything from the political elections to anything else. And what's kind of interesting, most of our use case that we've been discussing right now has been health-centric. However, Taiwan AI Labs actually leverage the same technologies and the problem patterns to address, for instance, election disinformation in another realm with their infodemic platform. And this has actually captured the attention of quite a number of folks in the U.S. government market. And Ethan has been invited by Hillary Clinton to do a panel with the Aspen Institute on March 28th in New York City to talk about AI, and specifically the risks of AI impact the political realm. And perhaps you might want to say a few words about infodemic as sort of another use case founded on the same set of technologies.
Okay, that is actually a very interesting topic. So a lot of time we think about the technology, the fundamental technology is actually the same. The way we understand how you human talk like ChatGPT, that's large language model. You look into the genomic sequence is similar to language model. We learn how the genomics talk. Therefore, we can understand the disease and the related to which genomic difference. Also, for the information propagation, um, along with the COVID-19, we also Taiwan also facing a big challenge is because we are number one in terms of foreign government distribution of false information. Therefore, we actually found a lot of misinformation happening in Taiwan will also occur in other countries in the same pattern. For example, like running out of toilet paper, this kind of information manipulation happen in Taiwan first, then Japan, Australia, then go to United States. So we want one wave after the other wave, the information manipulation happen in Taiwan first. Therefore, also use the large language model like ChatGPT and use it to identify all the information on the news media and also the social media. And we train our artificial intelligence program how to identify the uh, authentic user and the inauthentic user, which means we can distinguish the real user and also the fake account, troll account. Account is being controlled by the campaign company, or the account is controlled by the 5 cents from China or Russia. So we can identify different account. And interesting, we found actually, if you look into the social media nowadays, a very good advantage of the information is actually disputes by those troll accounts. A very good percentage, and almost all the public issue. You can just imagine, like when we have email, then after a couple of years, the spam email is increased more than human beings email. And same thing on the social media. Now we have social media, we have accounts, and now according to our study, during the election, during the pandemic and during the Taiwan's election, a considerable percentage of the information spread out on the social media is actually not from the real user, it's from the troll account group. Take Taiwan presidential election, for example. We actually monitor billions of activity last year, over a year. We identified more than tens of thousands of troll activities. And with this troll activity, we can identify what are the topic these troll can try to misleading people, and what are the topic this troll can is trying to discredit United States. For example, when we see in April 2023, when Joe Biden said United States will support Taiwan if there's the military invasion. And then we see a lot of troll come into the social media and help to discredit, for example, saying, oh, United States is supporting Taiwan to develop the bioweapons in Southeast China Sea, for example. So we discovered this kind of activity. Therefore, during the election last year, the major thing we do is we identify the impact of the information manipulation. We identify the information created by troll account. A lot of them is actually created by the Gen AI, including text, image, show videos. I would say fact checking or debunking is useless now today. After we have Gen AI, then we have all these troll accounts. So the strategy we have work closely with the Taiwan Social Scientist Group. We actually identify and disclose what is happening on the social media. So in this way, to encourage people's um, resilience and those information manipulation. Yeah, that's what we did in Taiwan.
It was terrific. Thank you so much for that overview. So now we need to talk about some of the risks and challenges associated with AI. Clement, from your perspective, what are you seeing?
Well, certainly the integrity of the training data, and some of it being willfully bad. Some of it's codifying biases that have already existed in the data a priori. That's probably one of the biggest risks. Second is actually the willful misuse of it, whether it's in deep fakes and what have you. Um, there's also third-party risks, creating exposures. There's IP infringement, risk of data exposure, data loss. And then there's always a new threat vector with Gen AI enabling, a new breed of malware, et cetera. Lots of risks for sure. Uh, Ethan, any other thoughts on that?
Yes, I echo what Clement just said. There's always bias in AI. So a lot of people think, okay, now I use artificial intelligence, but for example, the Facebook will say I use AI to censor the misinformation, but whoever audit this AI algorithms. Um, so the bias of AI comes from the quality of the data. For example, the bias of the labeler. For example, also the reason when we talk about like content censorship in Mandarin, we always ask, do you train this content censorship in Taiwan or in China? That's very different because the data, then the social status is very different. How you collect the data, how you label it, that can result in a very different result. So that's the third part is um, so what is the risk if we misuse the artificial intelligence? For example, you cannot ask ChatGPT for healthcare advice. For the diagnosis of such, ChatGPT is not designed for the healthcare situation. It's not for the financial situation. A lot of people will try to follow ChatGPT to understand the world, but a lot of information from the ChatGPT is actually not real. It has a humanization. Therefore, the misuse of AI or even using AI to create a misinformation, you can train ChatGPT to generate the news that never happened, but people think that's real because ChatGPT is so convincing, so he can convince everyone through some prompt engineering. The same thing to the deepfake video and deepfake image. Uh, in the past, we said to see is to believe, but in the future, we said to see we cannot believe. We still need to verify the source.
That's a good point. That's
Yes.
true.
So I would say there are a lot of new issues are happening and new risks happening now, and we already identify, especially for the democracy country, like we just mentioned, information manipulation is actually a trending topic, which means now we can leverage the artificial intelligence to create a lot of accounts, to spread out a lot of information and let people think something that doesn't exist, but you can repeat having troll can say that, then that become the misleading information, then make a real impact. Like right now, the toilet was a very good example. So I would say, yes, because Taiwan Island, we dedicate our effort on trustworthy and responsible technology. Um, the major challenge for us is how we can put human back into the center of the artificial intelligence. We control the AI instead of being controlled by AI. On the other side, maybe the government from Russia, China, or the big tech, they want to make profit. So how we can make sure the technology is being used in a trustworthy way, how we can evaluate and how we can work together with the regulators in the future. So a lot of people like in the European Union, people are saying when you are using AI for the general public, then it should be like a FDA drug. When you say this AI have this is at least good in diagnosis, then you need to have the clinical trial in that field with the local data and local people. So that's a lot of discussion going on right now. I think a lot of effort in Taiwan, a lot of expert and a good result happening. Of course, if DS federal work closely with U.S. federal government, we can maybe we can share our experience and we can um, make this solution in Taiwan. That's what we did. I can also be leveraging United States, and of course, United States is all the big tech company in US. So we all can also imagine if we work closely with DS Federal for the healthcare with a big tech company, then with a trustworthy methodology and the scale methodology we do in Taiwan, we can make this more impactful and more practical. Yeah.
Excellent. Thank you so much for that. So, what hot takes do you have on AI?
I guess I have two. The first is a little bit on what Ethan touched on, um, keeping the human in the central position on AI. The human always has to be the noun. The AI can only be an adjective and possibly a verb, but the human being, as opposed to the human doing, has to be central to it. And if we don't view AI as a tool, then ultimately we're going to be the tool. And that would be the first thing I would say. The second thing I would say is that new technology plus old process always translates into expensive old process. And I think when AI is on the scene, whether people think about use cases or whatever, I can't tell you how many times people ask me, well, what should my AI strategy be? When you word the question as what should my AI strategy be? I'm 99.999% certain the answer is going to involve AI. And that's the problem. It's not about AI is, again, the adjective or the verb, it's not the noun. And ultimately, if you're going to employ AI in a way that's meaningful and productive and efficient, et cetera, you're probably going to have to co-evolve the processes in concert, not just the process, but the organizational construct and everything else in concert with the implementation of the technology. Otherwise, you're just going to end up with a very expensive old process. Ethan, do you have other thoughts?
Yes, similar to what Cameron just mentioned. Right now, we talk about every AI everywhere, every day. But I think after a couple of years, maybe we don't need mention about AI because AI is already everywhere. So in the future, I would say the artificial intelligence will become our day-to-day life. Therefore, how we can live AI in a trustworthy way, there will be a lot of called ethic we need to put in practice. So it's not only AI cannot you cannot view AI as only a profit machine or a technology to control the disease, to control the human beings. Otherwise, this technology may go in the wrong direction, and we are not able to change it back. So I think it is also the reason the discussion happened in March 28th. I think there's a global uh, worry about artificial intelligence in the future because this year is actually a super election year. Over I think this over 60 democracy country will do the election. And at the same time, actually a lot of technical guys is already telling people like Taiwan, we know the information manipulation using AI is already happening. A lot of top smart guys, they are saying like a democracy index around the world is actually declining because artificial intelligence and the power using technology to control human beings' mindset is so powerful. Therefore, you can see not only control how people think, how to control the disease. Right now, a lot of people, when they want to go to a restaurant, for example, they find they will pick the same restaurant because they all look into Google Map. Artificial intelligence will be the same. They will all ask ChatGPT, or they will, when they do a diagnosis, there will be another AI to do it. So in the end, all the decision making will reside on the one super intelligence. Then how we can audit this super intelligence? Is that work for the government, work for the profit, or work for human beings' good? That's the very interesting topic we can discuss if we want to do the government technology.
I'll tell you, Ethan, if it would be really calamitous if it turns out that the machine intelligence becomes the real intelligence and the human becomes the artificial intelligence. Crazy.
Well, I'll say this has been such an incredible discussion. I have learned so much, and I'm so excited to have the opportunity to meet you, Ethan, and certainly collaborate with you as well, Clement, to have these conversations so that people to provide awareness, to make those connections, and to see what's not only happening here in America, but also internationally, and how all of that needs to be connected, so that we can ensure that we are driving to a trustworthy state. So thank you both so much for your time. Thank you for your perspective. And Ethan, I so look forward to the session that you're doing with the Aspen Institute on AI on March 28th as well.
Thank you, Susan. Thank you for having me today.
Thanks, Susan. Appreciate the time, and thanks for joining us, Ethan. This has been great.
Thank you. Thank you, Clement.
This concludes today's episode of the Fed to Fed podcast. If you enjoyed this episode, please don't forget to subscribe, rate, and leave a review. Your feedback helps us continue bringing you thought-provoking conversations with the brightest minds in government technology. Stay tuned for our next episode, where we will continue to explore opportunities to harness the power of technology and explore what's next in developing a more innovative and efficient government. Until then, this is the Fed to Fed podcast by GovTech Connects. Thank you for joining us.